Hello everyone, and welcome to our Sparx Global presentation entitled Rapid Development of Microservice Architectures Using Enterprise Architect. Sparx Global encompasses Sparx companies around the world that facilitate services, support, localization, training, mentoring, and much more around Sparx systems tooling. This includes Enterprise Architect, Pro Cloud Server, Web EA, and our entire tool suite, including Sparx Systems Prolaborate. If you enjoy the content today, please feel free to reach out to Doug or any of the Sparx Services team, and they'll be more than happy to help. Their contact details are on sparxsystems.com/partners, sparxservices.html. So our presenters today, I'm joined by Doug Rosenberg, and he's going to be presenting part one of the webinar. He's the founder, CTO of Parallel Agile Incorporated. I've known Doug for many, many years, and he has extensive experience in current technologies, cross-platform mobile application development, REST APIs, NoSQL databases, codebots. He's an expert Agile coach, and he's published over 7 books in software engineering and Agile development, and I'm very pleased and proud to have some of them sitting on my bookshelf at home. My name's Scott Hebbard. I'm the Communications Manager here at Sparx Systems, and I'm your host today. So I'll be handling questions, and I'll be talking about a few slides at the end of the webinar. So the agenda for today, part one is to learn how to use Enterprise Architect to rapidly generate a microservice architecture from a domain model. And Doug's going to be doing that presentation. And then part two, we're going to learn how to create visual models of sprint plans, user stories, tasks, epics, continuous integration testing, both within Enterprise Architect and using Pro Cloud Server and Web EA. And at the end, we'll take some questions from the audience and then we'll wrap things up. But right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to hand over to Doug, who's going to present the first part, which is learning how to use Enterprise Architect to rapidly generate a microservice architecture from the domain model. So,
thank you, Scott.
Just bringing the slides up now. Thank you.
So here we go. I'm Doug. Happy to be talking to you today. Very happy to be working with Scott and with Sparx again. So let me introduce you to the example that we're going to be going through. I have a habit of liking to illustrate things with real live examples. So what you're about to see is some work that's actually going on right now with a game project that we've been developing. And this game is called Tiki Man Go. It was designed in Enterprise Architect. It is a Hawaiian-themed virtual reality, augmented reality game. And we just released version 1, which is virtual reality only. Got published to both App Store and Google Play within the last 2 weeks. And so pretty excited about that. And we're now starting to work on version 2 of the game. The project is built in something called Unity 3D, which is a game development engine. And all the database sits in the cloud in a database called MongoDB. And our front-end Unity code connects to our back-end cloud database through an API, specifically a Node.js API. So all of our back-end code, the Mongo and Node code, is automatically generated from our Enterprise Architect domain model using a combination of our Parallel Agile add-in for EA and something we call the CodeBot, which is our cloud-based code generator. So let's go straight into what we're doing right now, which is now we worked on this game for a couple of years and we decided it was finally time to publish it. And we made a decision to go ahead and publish it without a feature called achievements. Achievements give you bonus points when you've logged into the game every day for 3 weeks or something like that, right? So version 2 needs to extend our database schema to handle this new feature. And the process that we're following is we're designing a new database schema by updating our domain model in EA and then regenerating the database and API. And in doing this, we don't have to code any of the back end of this by hand. So here is our EA domain model. We had prototyped achievements before, changed it around, and now we have a new schema for achievements and for keeping track of progress. And we want to just go ahead and snap our fingers and say, please make me a new backend that reflects these changes so that we can keep coding. So we use our Parallel Agile add-in for Enterprise Architect, and once that add-in is installed, you basically right-click, say Specialize Parallel Agile Generate Project, and at that point, our CodeBot takes over, and you have to log in. You need an account on the CodeBot website, but then it starts building a new project, and in a few seconds, and it's literally a few seconds, it's less than 60 seconds. Basically, you can download a zip file with the whole backend for your project in it. So we went ahead and downloaded that zip file, and you can see we've got server-side code, we've got client-side code, and we've got API documentation that's all generated automatically just after we update the EA domain model. So this gives us very, very rapid iteration on what we're doing. So that the code generator writes code very quickly. I think it's about 300 or 400 lines of code per collection, and every JavaScript file you see here represents one of the collections, one of the classes on that domain model. So we're starting on the client side, and we're going to look a little bit at the client side code for achievements, and then we're going to look at the server side code for achievements. And so right now we're generating on the client side JavaScript and Java. We're extending that to cover C# and Swift. So what our CodeBot generates for each collection in our database is the basic database access functions. And some of you may be familiar with the acronym CRUD, stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. There's actually about 7 of them because there's read one, read many, things like that. And so all of these database access functions, essentially a database access API, is generated for each of those domain objects. This is the JavaScript client, so it's set up to do Ajax, which is asynchronous JavaScript, which means that for every function that we call, we have a success callback and an error callback we fill in the details of. And then this create statement down here is an API call to our cloud database. So the architecture here is that we have client-side code on the left. It calls a node/express API, and the API handles all the database access. So if we want to make one of these new achievements objects, we call achievements.create. That calls, if you look at the code here on the right, there's create one or create many. That's a post call. So that's how you say create in MongoDB, is you say post. And you could see we're doing type checking on the JSON, catching errors, throwing those errors back as exceptions to the client side. And so this is the server side analog to create, read, update, delete, is get, put, post. Okay. So the good news is this code, it's kind of not real lovely to look at, and it's a little bit tedious to write. And the good news is you don't have to write it. And this code, which is the client side, is maybe a little bit less ugly to look at, but it's still kind of tedious to write. You don't have to write that either. So none of this code has to be written by hand. None of that code has to be written by hand. All we have to do is update the domain model in Enterprise Architect. So another thing that you would have to do by hand normally is you'd have to make an API document. Basically document all the calls into your API so that all your developers know what they're doing. we decided that we should generate the API documentation at the same time as we're generating the code. And so you immediately get an API doc. And you can drill down. So if you want to look down into achievements, this tells us, and here's a little sample of the JSON structure that you can post on there. And for your convenience, but not mandatory at all, is that we're automatically hosting your API using AWS Lambda. And the reason we do that, if you choose to have us do that, is so that you can immediately start testing the API. So literally within a few seconds of updating your domain model in EA and pulling down generate project, we've not only given you the zip file to download it, which has all your code in it, but we've hosted that API for you. So we've hosted Mongo and Node and Express and all of that stuff on an API, an AWS Lambda instance. And if you hit this try it out button, you can actually try out your API to see if it's working. That means you can try out get, put, post, patch, delete. All this happens just pretty much immediately after you generate the project. If you choose to use our hosted API, it's all hosted securely, so you have to get an access token. And so you can basically go in and grab this access token off the CodeBot website, paste it into a tool like Postman, and Postman now allows you to access that API, and essentially you can manipulate your backend cloud database very quickly and seamlessly just by updating your EA domain model. So we think this is pretty exciting stuff. And basically here we've verified that post is working, and now we've verified that get is working. So you typically put something in the database and then read it back. And if it reads back to you the same thing that you put in there, then you know that your server-side code is working, your client-side code is working, your API is hosted and testable, and you can immediately start prototyping or building your app. In our case, we did this prototype first, got the app built, released, and now we're going to build version 2. So we haven't broken anything in our version 1 API, but we can just start working with the new stuff that we need to build version 2. So we've had this capability for a few months with basically one database, which is MongoDB. And Mongo's a pretty good database for a lot of things, especially if you're doing prototype-driven development, which is what the parallel agile process is very much about. We believe that one of the fastest ways to learn about your requirements is to build some working code, build a prototype. But then we go back and actually do some really careful modeling on our use cases and things like that to do a good solid design and handle all the rainy day scenarios and the error modes and things like that. But we haven't stopped with the Mongo and Node. We're doing a bunch of interesting stuff kind of in the lab at Parallel Agile. And there's a couple of things that are going to make our enterprise edition of CodeBot pretty exciting. One is we're adding a lot more database targets. So even though we like Mongo and we like doing stuff with Mongo, we recognize that the whole world doesn't run on Mongo. So we are now building more database targets. Those include Oracle, MySQL, Firebase, Postgres. We're adding more client-side targets. So our C# client is mostly done right now, and we're starting to test it. And then we're doing something that I find really kind of fascinating, which is that we're working on generating automatic caching of databases using Redis, which is a memory resident database. And so when you need a high performance database, our CodeBot will have a lot of functionality to handle automatic caching. And then there's the last bullet on this slide, which I personally am really excited about. And that's something that we are calling executable wireframes. So if you've used Enterprise Architect, you're aware that it has a wireframing tool built into it. And as we kind of got down the path of reading UML class diagrams and generating working code from the UML class diagrams, I kept bugging people saying, hey, why don't we do the same thing for wireframes? Hey, we need to do this for wireframes. And so after me agitating for a few months, we, my partner in crime, Matt Stevens over in London, pulled a little magic on the CodeBot internals and have him working with some of our other developers, have got some pretty encouraging prototypes going of generating code from wireframes. What you're seeing here on the left is a wireframe in Enterprise Architect. Then that generates some code. In this case, this particular code is a Google language called Flutter. And we decided to start with Flutter because it generates Android, iOS, and web app code all from a single source. So we thought that'd be pretty cool. And then what you're looking at on the right is actual Android code generated from this EA wireframe. Here's another example. This one is generated for a web application. And so you can see what we started to do is first model your problem domain on a class diagram and generate a cloud database. Now we're working on model your screens as wireframes, make those wireframes executable. And we're pretty excited. We're working not just on Flutter, but we're working on React, Angular, and native Android right at the moment. So a lot of capability coming out soon. Ultimately, what we're really working on, what our ulterior motive at Parallel Agile is kind of a full model view controller code generation paradigm. The way I think about software is I think of software as a bunch of use cases. And inside use cases, I think of those use cases as having a model part, a view part, and a controller part, where the model part's pretty much the database, the view part is pretty much the screens, and the controller part is pretty much the logic. One of the things that inspired me to go down this path is, I think it was around 10 years ago now, Scott, that we did a few ebooks about some features that you folks built in Enterprise Architect that really always have intrigued me, and I've always thought they should be getting more traction than I've seen, and that is the business rule composer, which allows you to express your business rules not in code, but as a simple set of equations. And then the behavioral code generation, and I think this is unique to Enterprise Architect, and I was always hugely impressed by it, which is the ability to generate meaningful application logic from state diagrams, activity diagrams, and sequence diagrams. So that behavioral code generation is described in some ebooks that I wrote. It's also in the Enterprise Architect help files, and I'm sure Scott can point you at tutorials to that on the Sparx YouTube channel. But anyway, that's kind of what we're working on the technical side. But we're also doing stuff on the project management side, and we're leveraging a lot of Enterprise Architect capability with a couple of small extensions that we've added. So I'll hand it over to Scott in a minute, but let me introduce it first. When you install the Parallel Agile add-in, it automatically installs a UML profile. That UML profile has in it a toolbox for doing sprint plans. Sprint plans are pretty simple. It's basically the Agile project management paradigm of user stories to express essentially your requirements from the user perspective. You break those user stories down into the tasks needed to accomplish that requirement, and then you organize them into epics, which are collections of related user stories. And then we're using the Sparx functionality, for example, Kanban boards, to organize and prioritize our work. And then Scott's going to show you how you can take those user stories and sprint plans and export them into JIRA using ProCloud Server, and then do some stuff in JIRA and import stuff back into WebEA and synchronize a worldwide team doing that. So again, we're going to use an example from Tiki-Man Go, and this is the augmented reality, still unreleased, but this is the augmented reality part of Tiki-Man Go. And so we're using our UML profile for sprint plans. The green boxes here are user stories. The yellow ones are tasks, and the blue ones are epics. So this is one epic to deliver augmented reality. You can think of it as two main requirements. One, you have to be able to find the place where your enemies show up. And then two, you have to be able to fight your battle with a live camera, AR mode. And so for augmented reality, we had to make a map page to locate the battle scenes, make that map read locations from the database. And then in the AR mode, you have to recognize that you're in a battle location, start generating enemies, and do a bunch of other stuff. And we took these. This will give you a little snapshot of where we are in our EA capability. We've got a lot of, sorry, not EA capability, AR capability. We've got a lot of AR built already, and we're in the middle of testing it and refining it. We haven't put anything quite into the done column yet, but we can now navigate to the battle scenes and fight battles in AR mode on Android. But we still have iOS in our queue. Turns out we need two different augmented reality toolkits, AR Core for Android and AR Kit for iOS. So right now our Android team is slightly ahead of our iPhone team. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott now, and Scott's going to tell you about WebEA and the JIRA integration.
Thanks, Doug. So what I'm going to be talking about is the ProCloud Server, and the ProCloud Server supports a number of integrations. So it supports integrations with Enterprise Architect itself, with JIRA, with ServiceNow, and there are a number of different integrations. But for this particular example, we're going to talk about how ProCloud Server allows you to link Enterprise Architect and JIRA elements and allow some communication between these two items. We're going to show you how to create linked JIRA items and how to synchronize those pages and how to create a linked Enterprise Architect element. We're going to look at how you can add comments in JIRA and then read those comments in Enterprise Architect, and make comments in Enterprise Architect and then read those in JIRA, which basically allows a global distributed team to be able to all talk with one another. We're going to look at WebEA, and look, there are some people out there that won't use JIRA and will just like to use Enterprise Architect for everything, and that's what we do here at Sparx. But for those people that do use JIRA, it allows you to collaborate with people that are using JIRA and to communicate and talk to them and to discuss elements, to discuss bugs, and to discuss some of the things that we've looked at today. So Enterprise Architect and JIRA users can discuss development and project management, creating a truly agile, parallel development environment where it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can communicate, you can work together, and you can develop software together. So The very first thing I'm going to look at is WebEA. Now, everything that I'm showing you is based on the Pro Cloud Server, which is a product from Sparx Systems. And what it does is it allows you to take the models that you've seen. And so you can see here is a Kanban diagram that Doug was showing before. And it allows you to deploy this via WebEA. And the benefit of this is that it allows you to take your models, your epics, your requirements, your class diagrams, your business logic, and to be able to have anybody in the world be able to look at that via a web browser, via a mobile phone, via a cell phone, via any internet connected device. So they can simply go to the website and can view your model, but not only can they view the model, but they can view changes in real time. So if I make a change to the model in Enterprise Architect, then that gets automatically updated. And if I have a team of 150 around the world, you know, someone in America and someone in Australia and someone in Europe can all be looking at the same requirements and epics and user stories and class diagrams and activity diagrams to comment on it, view it, make suggestions. They can add new elements, all using WebEA. So this gives an amazing amount of power, especially in current times where we have social distancing and we have lots of staff working from home. This is something that's very powerful and unique. You can use Pro Cloud Server in order to allow globally dispersed teams that have to work from home possibly, or work from different sites, to be able to collaborate, communicate, and see model elements. Now, being able to link to JIRA is quite easy. So from Enterprise Architect, you simply select the synchronize section up the top, and you use a hamburger menu on the left there to open external data sources. You select JIRA, and then you select the particular model that you want to open. And what that does is, based on the Pro Cloud Server, this allows you to take Enterprise Architect and then link to external elements that are stored in JIRA, and to have that two-way communication between JIRA and Enterprise Architect, which is really quite powerful. So yes, it's the quite easy. Now here we've got a screenshot of a JIRA. You can see that we have a project called the Tiki Man software project, and you can see that there's items here in the backlog, and you have elements here that are selected for development, and you have comments, and you can create issues and bugs and reports, and create these in JIRA, but based on elements that have been built in Enterprise Architect. And you can map any element in Enterprise Architect to an element in JIRA, and you simply need to create those mappings, and that gives you a great deal of power and flexibility. Now, Doug happened to show a Kanban diagram, but some people might use heat maps, and some people might use requirements, and some people might use some of the capabilities in the Babok features or requirements or sprint plans, and you can map all of those Enterprise Architect elements to JIRA elements and allow them to communicate. Now, once you create these new tickets in JIRA, you can then automatically insert them into Enterprise Architect. So basically, you select the specialized ribbon, you highlight the element in the project browser, you right-click that element, and you simply, using that little hamburger menu from before, you can add that to Enterprise Architect. And then once that element's in Enterprise Architect, you have the full modeling capability and power of Enterprise Architect combined with that JIRA element. So you can link these JIRA elements to requirements, to use cases, to classes, to epics. You can link them to business logic. You can attach a document and a report that details how it should work. And so it gives you not only the flexibility of being able to communicate between Enterprise Architect and JIRA, but it also gives you full traceability so that you can map these items in JIRA to elements in Enterprise Architect, and you can model how all of that works together. You'll note on the right-hand side that you can see that the mapped properties are listed. So these happen to be bugs, and these bugs are now displayed as issues in Enterprise Architect, and they could be further mapped to testing regimes, or you could have a set of a requirement checklist, and you could link it to a requirements checklist, and you can then also use the Kanban diagram and some of the project management features in Enterprise Architect to assign resources to get these tasks or bugs addressed and to get them fixed. You'll note in the notes window, there's a local tab and an external tab. So any notes that are written in JIRA will appear in the external tab. So you can have local notes and external notes. And of course, you can have element discussions, and you can have discussions that you start in Enterprise Architect and view in JIRA as well. So coming back to Enterprise Architect, what this allows you to do is you can then take JIRA elements. So you can see the one in yellow is a backlog item there saying inaccurate scoring on health when ticketman is heard in an instance. And we can drag that and put that in the queue. And any of the elements in Enterprise Architect can also be created as items in JIRA, and can be created as tickets. So you've got that two-way communication, so that you kind of have a seamless integration between your model and your JIRA implementation. And this allows you to then rely on and use some of Enterprise Architect's traceability features, its project management features, as Doug mentioned before, some of the business logic features. So you get the best of both worlds. You get your existing JIRA Agile implementation, and you get the best modeling environment that allows you to do it all within Enterprise Architect. And at the moment, so this certainly helps with things like social distancing and being able to work from home, because people can work on the model, some people can work on the business logic, some people can work on the code engineering. They can all work in parallel. Everything can be saved in a cloud-based model using the Pro Cloud Server. Enterprise Architect can allow everybody to access that, to comment on it, to have discussions, to be able to collaborate. And so what we've seen in today's session is not only the ability to go from a domain model to code, but we've also seen the ability to go from a wireframe to code, and then to be able to create a truly collaborative agile development environment where based on Enterprise Architect and Pro Cloud Server, you can take some of your agile development in JIRA and model that in Enterprise Architect and have traceability. So in this webinar, we showed you how to use Enterprise Architect to generate a microservice architecture from a domain model. We've also showed you how to use Enterprise Architect for sprint planning in order to generate JIRA tickets from your EA model. So what we think is this is a pretty compelling story, that we're going from domain model to code, from wireframes to code, and being able to maintain and manage discussions and project management and JIRA tickets and agile development, and all do it within Enterprise Architect. And we've done it, and Doug's been kind enough to present today using a real world example. Now, I know from my perspective, we'd probably do all of the code and write it all in EA, and we might do a few things differently, but and we might not even use JIRA. We might just do all the project management in Enterprise Architect. However, what I wanted to show is that Enterprise Architect, it does allow this integration. It does allow teams to work together. We really can go from a domain model to code, wireframe to code, and we can model this all together. So what I'd like to do is probably wrap it up now, and I'll take some questions. What I'd like to do is I'll just start off with a real simple one for you, Doug. And I just wanted to ask, from your perspective, what are some of the advantages of using Enterprise Architect and the Pro Cloud Server and CodeBot from just as a developer that's creating code? What are some of the benefits of that over a more traditional approach? Might just get you to unmute.
There it
Okay.
is. Sorry, Scott.
There it is. No problems.
I was unable to unmute for a second. I might need you to repeat the question because I was.
Yeah, no problems. No, you're trying to unmute. So, what are some of the advantages of using Enterprise Architect, Pro Cloud Server, and CodeBot in order to, develop a mobile application over a more traditional approach? What are some of the benefits that you've found, and how's it helped you with respect to productivity?
Sure. The advantages of Enterprise Architect are that you really, in my mind, shouldn't skip the design, the UML design part of building an application. And I think it's very unfortunate that sometimes that happens in industry. I think one of the reasons that it happens is that people don't like to, or let me phrase it differently, people like to get to code very quickly. And I think there's a lot of merit to getting to code very quickly. And what the CodeBot does is it says you can get to code. I mean, typically to sketch out a domain model for a project is a matter of a couple of hours. And if you use the CodeBot, you can get executable working backend database code within the first day, like right at the inception of your project. That enables kind of a prototype-driven requirements discovery. And then once you've discovered your requirements, I still like to go through and work all the use cases and decompose them and identify my rainy day scenarios and my failure modes, and the combination of Enterprise Architect and the CodeBot enables the process that allows us to do that. So if I can speak a little bit loosely here, Parallel Agile takes sort of a code first, design later approach to Agile development. And that's just different from some Agile processes, which are code first and then skip the design stage. We think skipping the design stage is a very, very bad idea. And the time you spend designing always pays for itself in fewer bugs and less hot fixes. So I think it's a great combination. And I would also like to say, one of the things that I find really outstanding about what Sparx has done with Enterprise Architect is the extensibility. I mean, you've got extensibility. We were able to build an add-in that reads part of the model and then does stuff in the cloud. In that same add-in, we have UML profile for doing sprint planning. And then you've got integration on the back end that Sparx has built to take all the project management stuff and drop it into JIRA and do stuff in JIRA and come back in. So, and then when you add on top of it the Pro Cloud Server, where your model actually lives in the cloud, and you get people able to seamlessly collaborate, I just think it's really powerful.
Thanks, Doug. I might just take a couple of Pro Cloud Server questions. So David said, can you restrict access to what different sets of users can see in WebEA? So yes, we didn't show it, but you can set up passwords and you can password protect and you can control who sees what sections of the model, and there's a whole configuration aspect within WebEA where you can control if users can add elements, whether they can add comments. So you certainly have fine-grained control over what they see and how they can contribute to the model. So you can make it just completely read-only so that they could see the sprints and the epics and the use cases and view it, and even that is really powerful to make that available in people's hands everywhere around the world, and it's really great for getting teams to work together. But you can then take it to the next level and add comments and and allow people to add their own requirements in the field. There's another change saying if you change the domain model, does the CodeBot have to build the whole code base again, or just the changes and new items? So Doug, could you talk about that?
Yeah, it actually regenerates the whole thing again, but it does it really, really quickly. So
yes,
it does it in 30 or 40 seconds, and with the auto web hosting, it basically just regenerates it, and it's immediately available for testing. One of the keys to that is that the generated code that we use pretty much doesn't require modification after you generate it. So the parts of the application that we're generating, essentially the database and the API to access the database are, I think the term is immutable, right? You generate them and you never modify them. And so when you regenerate, it just overwrites it, and you just never touch that generated code, and that avoids synchronization problems when regenerating.
Excellent. Yeah, there's a comment from Dean saying don't forget the watch lists in WebEA. It's really great for keeping up with changes, and so you can set up watch lists. So it'll tell you, every time you log into WebEA, what changes have occurred for the day, what elements have been updated, and you can modify that too. So yeah, when this gets published on the Sparx Systems website, we might include some links to how to create watch lists. I am conscious of the time, so there's just a few things I'll mention. We will aim to try and get this up and published on YouTube within 48 hours. We will try to go through some of the questions in more detail and have them listed on the Sparx Systems website. If you want to learn more about Parallel Agile and the services they provide, please email Doug at parallelagile.com, and I'm sure he would be happy to help you and to assist you, especially with CodeBot and parallel development. If you want to download the Pro Cloud Server, if you want to download a trial of Enterprise Architect, please go to sparxsystems.com and check it out. We've got lots of documentation on how the Pro Cloud Server works for setting up collaborative team-based environments, and for using WebEA to deliver models into the hands of teams that may be working from home or working remotely, which I know lots of people are finding quite valuable now. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time. It's been great having you on board today, Doug, talking about a real world example that has been using EA to get some real results. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the opportunity.
No problems, and have a great day, everyone. Take care, look after everyone, and look forward to seeing you at another webinar coming up real soon.